Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, the Toronto Maple Leafs have all but set their defensive pairings ahead of the start of the season, so let's go over them in today's video. We're going to go through each of the pairings individually, and I should start with Morgan Rielly and TJ Brodie, but that's not necessarily what caught my eye when I first saw this. It was the fact that Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl are once again reunited on a D pairing to start this season, so that's where I want to start. Now, Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl are no strangers to playing with each other. Back in that 2021 season, the year that was the Canadian division, they were fantastic. They were the Maple Leafs shutdown pairing, and most people remember them for playing 3 straight games against the Edmonton Oilers, and the Maple Leafs winning all of those games, only allowing 1 goal and holding Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to just 1 point between the both of them. It was a no-brainer for Sheldon Keefe to go into last season and say, okay, yeah, Jake Muzzin, Justin Holl, you're playing together again. But it was frustratingly and confusingly bad to start the season. And if we're looking at the advanced numbers here, overall, Justin Holl and Jake Muzzin playing together, they weren't that bad, but they weren't as good as what they were the year before, which is what the frustrating part was. And most of it stemmed to us just not really understanding or not really knowing what was going on with the Jake Muzzin at the time. It looked like he was hurt to start last season. He was noticeably slower. He was frustrated making plays with the puck. And that pairing just wasn't able to work the way that it was the previous season. When I see Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl paired together again to start this season, I don't understand that decision. Because if we're looking at their numbers playing away from each other last year at 5-on-5, these two guys, when they weren't on the ice together, were drastically different players and they were dramatically better. In my mind, they shouldn't be anywhere near each other just by going off of the numbers from last season. Morgan Rielly and TJ Brodie have played together more than any other Maple Leafs D pairing over the last couple of seasons. And watching these two guys play together in that 2021 season, the first year they were together, it was like a breath of fresh air because the Maple Leafs had finally found a consistent D partner for Morgan Rielly. You know, it only took like 7 or 8 years or however long it was, and they were good. They were very effective. But midway through last year, the pairing was split up. And I don't think it had anything to do with their play, although there was a slight drop in their numbers. I think it had more to do with the Maple Leafs just not knowing what to do with Jake Muzzin. Because like we had already said, Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl just wasn't working out. And Timothy Liljegren was another right side option, but you know, he was in his rookie season, and I don't think that was necessarily fair to task him with helping Jake Muzzin get out of the funk that he was in. And after the Maple Leafs had acquired Ilya Lyubushkin, I had written an article for theleafsnation.com saying that it was titled, Ilya Lyubushkin is the key to the Maple Leafs trade deadline. And not because I thought he was going to be like an all-star shutdown defenseman, or because I thought that they were going to trade him and get a king's ransom for him. It was because Morgan Rielly and him had played together for a bit before I had written that article, and they were fairly effective. And Sheldon Keefe was gaining confidence in that D pairing. And if Morgan Rielly was going to play with Ilya Lyubushkin, then that would allow TJ Brodie to be a problem solver elsewhere in their lineup. And what Jake Muzzin was struggling with, carrying the puck and breaking out of his own zone, those are two things that TJ Brodie really excels with. So when Morgan Rielly was playing with Ilya Lyubushkin, Jake Muzzin and TJ Brodie were a pretty effective pairing for the Maple Leafs down the stretch and into that series against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And their numbers in the playoffs were quite good. And with Ilya Lyubushkin's departure in the offseason, it's not just as easy as keeping Jake Muzzin and TJ Brodie together, because then who's going to play with Morgan Rielly? It wouldn't be fair to task that with Rasmus Sandin, who's just learning how to play the right side. I don't think they would ask Morgan Rielly to play the right side because it's probably not something that the Maple Leafs would want to do long term anyway. And the other logical choice would be Timothy Liljegren, but he's injured to start the season. And that they've tried Morgan Rielly and Justin Holl a couple of times. It really does not work. Trust me, you do not want that to be a deep pairing for the Maple Leafs this year, even more so than Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl. So I don't think it's really as much about Sheldon Keefe thinks Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl will just be good. No, it's seeing if they can recapture that magic from 2021, because if they can, great. It allows us to keep Morgan Rielly and TJ Brodie together, to continue being one of the most consistent D pairings that the Maple Leafs have had over the last number of years, and it checks off some boxes. But if Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl can't figure out their if they just can't figure it out there, I almost swore, well, then at least you have that answer in October as opposed to, January, February when you're trying to get ready for the trade deadline, and then March and April as you're trying to get ready for the playoffs. Now, Mark Giordano and Rasmus Sandin have never played together before, but Giordano does have a track record of playing with younger players and getting the best out of them. He did it with Dougie Hamilton and Rasmus Andersson in Calgary. He did it with Vince Dunn last year in Seattle, and he did it with Timothy Liljegren in Toronto as well. I have complete faith that he'll do it again, playing next to Rasmus Sandin, who's a very talented player in his own right. And I can understand how, looking at that tweet, seeing Jake Muzzin and Justin Holl as a pairing in the Maple Leafs top four might make you feel a bit anxious. If you've lost some faith in them as a shutdown pairing, I can totally understand that. But I'm here to tell you to not be as worried as maybe some of you are, because, the Maple Leafs D pairings are going to change. Things are fluid, and one of the biggest strengths of the Maple Leafs blue line last year was the versatility, to just be able to plug and play and move guys around in the lineup and find success. But also, whatever pairing Mark Giordano plays on, whether it's with Rasmus Sandin or Timothy Liljegren, that's going to be one of the better, if not the best, third pairs in the entire NHL. I don't think people are giving enough credit to Mark Giordano, even though he is 39. He was 38 last year. He was old last season, and he was still good. He's going to be old and good again this season. Coming over from Seattle to Toronto in the trade, in the 20 or so games that he played with the Leafs, he was on pace for like 50 points or something like that in a full year. This guy is still very, very good. And something that I was suggesting the Maple Leafs do last season was spread those tough minutes around a little bit. Maybe Jake Muzzin, he can't be the guy that plays 100% of those tough matchups anymore. Maybe it's 80 or 85%. Maybe it's a little bit less than that. Having Mark Giordano there, having Timothy Liljegren take a step, having Rasmus Sandin take a step, having Morgan Rielly and TJ Brodie be there, they can spread those minutes around. And together, as a six-man unit, I think the Maple Leafs are going to have one of the better defensive cores in the NHL. The Maple Leafs were already almost top 10 in every single defensive metric from last season, except for, of course, the goals against per 60, but the goaltending had something to do with that as well. And this season, they're going to get a full year of Mark Giordano. You're going to get development from guys like Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin. Maybe you have a healthier Jake Muzzin. I don't know, but there is reason to believe that this team could be better defensively than what it was last year. The fourth line this year has a purpose. They're going to play a hard, fast forechecking game. If they can get a guy like Zach Aston Reese signed, who's currently on a PTO, that guy got Selke votes a couple of years ago. Nick Kubel is a relentless forechecker. Guys like Kalle Järnkrok and Pierre Engvall. The Leafs could be a better defensive team than what they were this past year. And for the goaltenders, guys like Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov, the Capitals were a decent defensive team, but not as good as the Leafs last year. And if you're Matt Murray going from the Ottawa Senators, who were almost bottom 10 in every single defensive metric, to a team like the Leafs, who are almost top 10 in every metric and could be better this year, that certainly helps. It can't hurt, right? We're going to have time to talk about the goaltending. We'll probably be talking about the goaltending all season long. Even if it's good to start the season, I think people are going to be having the conversation of, yeah, it's good now, but when's it going to fall off the cliff? As for who comes out of the lineup when Timothy Liljegren returns from injury, I'm not really sure. That could be decided by how guys play. It could also be decided just by health. An injury could answer that question for us. But if you're looking at a guy like Justin Holl, who was the Maple Leafs' number 7 defenseman heading into last year's playoffs, it could very easily well be him. And there is a conversation to be had about how the Maple Leafs are going to be cap compliant to start the year. But John Tavares is injured, Pierre Engvall is injured, Timothy Liljegren is injured as well. So we don't have to answer that question today, or at least the first couple of weeks of the year. But if everyone is healthy at once, and the Maple Leafs want to sign Zach Aston Reese, and the belief is that they really want to sign Zach Aston Reese, because the guy got Selke votes a couple of years ago, and he hits absolutely everything that moves. That's a player that you want on your team. A trade may be coming, involving one of these defensemen, most likely Justin Holl. And if that's the case, I guess that's what it's got to be. But if the Maple Leafs are able to continue to kick the can down the road, let's say somebody else gets injured before one of those other players come back and they're just able to put them on LTIR and just keep that shuffle sort of going like they did last year, I won't complain about that either, because injuries are going to happen. And if they're able to keep all 7 of these guys together, all 6 of these guys, plus Timothy Liljegren, that would not be a bad thing. Depth is never a problem. But if they do need to trade away a guy like Justin Holl because of the salary cap, well, they also have Jordie Benn and Victor Mete, who are both injured right now, but they will be options for the Maple Leafs at some point as a 7th or even an 8th defenseman. So a trade could be coming here. That could solve our question as well. That would probably be the most exciting thing as well. But if a trade doesn't happen, because they're able to kind of circumvent the salary cap with LTIR and guys getting injured, I wouldn't complain about that either, because the defensive depth is nice. The worst case scenario, and I don't even know why I'm putting this out there into the world, is the Maple Leafs are put in a position where they need to trade Justin Holl because of the salary cap, but Victor Mete and Jordie Benn have already been claimed on waivers at the start of the season. And it'll be interesting to see how they work the Jordie Benn injury, because that is a little bit longer than what Victor Mete is expected to miss. I think his was like a day-to-day thing, but Jordie Benn is expected to be a couple of weeks if they place him on LTIR to begin the season and pull some shenanigans there so that they don't have to place him on waivers until they're absolutely sure of maybe what their salary cap situation is, and then they can maybe get away from the possibility of losing him. I don't know. There's a couple of different shenanigans that they can play and pull at, and we'll have to see it. And we're going to see it because the season is starting on Wednesday. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, I'll see you again in the next one.